Welcome to your weekly UAS news update. This is the week of March 1, 2021, and this week has been dominated by the DJI FPV drone. We got one right here. We've been flying it for a while, so I'm going to give you some first impressions. My first impression as someone who's really never flown FPV drones all that much. And then we're going to bring Don on board. Don is our FPV instructor, and he's going to give you his perspective from someone who's had almost a decade now of drone flying, FPV flying, and building over 100 FPV drones. So we'll see it's a different perspective from the both of us, and I think you'll find it interesting. The second topic I want to talk about this week is the FAA Online Training, and I want to see if you guys took the online training and talk about that part. And then the last thing is the arsonist, catching an arsonist using drones. That happened in California. So let's get to it. And the first thing this week is the FPV drone from DJI. It came out. We've already kind of customized ours, as you can tell. I've been flying this thing for a couple days now, and it's fun. I'm not gonna lie. This is actually one of the most fun drone I've flown in quite a while. I mean, I love flying the Inspire. I think the last time I was so excited about flying something, it was the Inspire 2. And this is different. This is different. There's a ton of reviews online as it is. So I'm not going to give you a full review of the drone itself. You know what it does. You know how it flies. What I want to give you is I want to give you my perspective from someone who really hasn't flown FPVs all that much. And the reason I haven't flown FPVs, quite frankly, is because I haven't had the time to dedicate to doing this. Flying FPV is kind of one of these things that's you have to devote time to doing it correctly. You have to build your drone, you have to maintain it, you have to look at the updates, you have to learn how to fly it. This is something that's very big, and I just haven't had the time to do this. Not that I don't want to. I think the FPV effect is really, really cool. Now with this, we are going to see a lot more of these FPV footage out there, just because now it's a lot more accessible. So I want to talk about my perspective, my first impression, if you want, and then we're going to talk to Don. Don flew this on the day that it came out, and Don has hundreds of hours of flying FPV, building them, tuning them. He's a pit tuner. If you don't know what the PID is the thing that tweaks the way that the drone flies in there to keep it very simple. Don actually is the one that changes these settings to make the drone butter smooth. So we'll get his perspective from someone who's got a ton of experience doing this. And it was really cool. It was really cool to see him get the drone. I kind of sat back and kind of listened to him flying through this thing and seeing the difference. And it was just really interesting. So we'll talk about that. And I want to get started with kind of what I got out of this. And I'm going to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the good is that this is awesome because this thing is accessible to anyone. No soldering, no tinkering with the software, we're getting the parts, which was always something that I think was a barrier to entry for people doing FPV. Now, a lot of people are going to say this is the fun part. Yeah, sure. It definitely is fun building things, taking them apart, figuring out how they work. That's definitely a ton of fun. But I think a lot of people were just afraid of getting into it. How do you get into it? So this kind of answers this question. It's very easy to fly. You've got a normal mode, you get a sports mode. Now you have a full manual mode that allows you to do all the crazy stuff that you can do with an FPV drone. But the normal mode and the sports mode, for me, for someone who's never really flown an FPV before and doesn't have all the background to do it, that was very easy. Just take off, just like you start the motors like you knew normally. You just basically get off the ground, and here you go. You're going to use the stick, so you've got the controller. I also have the, I call it the Harry Potter controller, the magic wand, where you can, it's called a motion controller. I played with that quite a bit as well, and it's been fun. But this thing right here just operates like a regular drone. So, if you want to go to the left, then you can start going to the left and yawing at the same time and do a combination of everything. But the cool thing, the good, remember we're still in the good part, this will hover in place in case something happens. And even talking to Don, and we'll see his perspective on that part, that was kind of a big thing. You don't have to keep this thing flying. If anything happens, just let go of the control and it's gonna recover on its own. So that's a big safety feature. It's affordable, quite frankly. $12.99 for this thing is very cheap for what you get, in a way. Very affordable because you get the goggles, you get the drone in itself, you get the controller, which, if you're in the FPV world, that's going to be pretty expensive. So I thought that was a big plus. In terms of the motion controller, this is something we've never really seen before. That motion controller is really neat, and it's got the ability to basically fly the drone using only one hand. So as we mentioned last week when we were talking to Haya from Drone Excel, this has the ability to open up a lot of doors for people with disabilities. People with only one arm will have the ability to fly. This was very intuitive. I have to say, I was really impressed. I was actually a little afraid to fly this thing the first time and get it off the ground, but I was actually really impressed with what you could do and very intuitive. Just you're going forward in the goggle, you can see a little dot that's going to take you places, and based on where the dot is located, that's where the drone is going to go. So that was really, really cool. Another thing that I was quite impressed with was the ADS-B notification. Now, this is something that we've had in the Mavic Air 2, where the drone AirSense captures the data from ADS-B aircraft in the area and then displays it on the goggles, basically telling you that there's something near you that you should be paying attention to, another aircraft that you need to give way to. So I like that. I really like that portion. I'm glad that they integrated this into the drone. Obviously, this is FPV, so you're going to be in the goggles. You have to put the goggles on, and then you kind of in your own world. I'll talk about the regulation in a second. I want to talk about the bad part from what I've seen so far. Now, this is a 20-minute video, and this is a 20-minute battery. Now, you're going to say, a 20-minute battery, isn't that cool? Yeah, it is, but when you start flying around in sports mode and flying a little bit faster, it's not 20 minutes. So I was actually surprised the first couple times that the battery warning came out, and then it goes into the return to home for low battery, and I was taken aback a little bit. So make sure you get the extra batteries if you're going to be flying this thing quite a bit, especially if you're going to be flying pretty fast in sports mode. The one thing that I didn't like with the setup in itself was a bit of a nightmare. I'll talk about that in a second. But the battery, the goggles have an external battery. And I know this is standard for these kind of goggles, but you have this wire dangling from the side and then a battery pack at the end of it. And I think this could have been done differently. I'm sure they can somewhat introduce a battery with inside the goggle in itself, which I think would make sense. In terms of durability, I'm not sure yet. I haven't flown it enough and dangerously enough that I don't know if it's durable. It's built strong, that's for sure. But some people online obviously are saying that if you crash it, then you crash it. And then even though it's modular, it's designed to be able to remove something and then put it back, it's still not at the level where it supposedly needs to be. So I'll give you more. There will be more of this coming from us as we fly it more. Another downside that I found is getting to the manual mode in this was extremely painful. You have a bunch of switches in the back. The switch that's right here that's supposed to go to manual mode is actually not set up as manual at first because, well, this is a safety thing, but you have to go through a bunch of menus and then you have to, anyway, it was a bit of a nightmare. We'll have a video on how you can do this with the drone, but just be ready to go through a bunch of steps to do this. Don just wanted to send the thing. He just wanted to fly this thing in manual mode, and we tried several times. Now, the manual in itself, the user manual, was not all that helpful. Typically, DJI is pretty good with this, but there were several things that needed to be done that were not in the manual, so I'm a bit disappointed there. Something else on the bad side, and this is not for everyone, but these goggles can make you pretty sick if you're not used to it. I'm actually one of these that people that are prone to car sickness. If I read a book in the car, it doesn't work really well for me. Putting the goggles on is okay if I don't go too crazy, but as soon as I start going a little bit crazy with the controller, then I get this motion sickness. So if you're prone to motion sickness when you start driving, this is something that you have to keep in mind. I'm not gonna lie, this is part of the reason why I was always a bit reluctant to go into FPV, just because of my history. I know that I have this history. It's funny because I can fly aircraft and I can do a whole bunch of things in an aircraft and never get sick, but as soon as you put goggles on, then it's a completely different world for me. So if you're in that situation, this is something that you need to be aware of. Flying, there is a simulator available with the goggles. Boy, I did this on my couch one evening just to play around, And I had to take the goggles off at one point, and then I was done for the rest of the evening because it just messes up your brain. Now this is not DJI's fault. This is just something that you need to be aware of. Another downside that I found, the app is somewhat limited in terms of the settings. There's not a whole lot of settings in here. You can access the settings. There's a button right here to get to the menu, and then of course you have to have the goggles on in order to do this. Another thing that I really don't like, and hopefully this is something that can be changed, is the fact that you cannot record what goes on inside the goggles. There's no HDMI out to display what's going on. There's a way to plug in the goggles using a cable to go to the DJI Fly app on your phone, but there's no way to get the telemetry and everything displayed outside of the drone in itself. So that was a bit of a pain it's a bit of a pain, especially for me, since I'm going to do different videos showing you what goes on inside the goggle. It's good. We're going to have to be creative. So I didn't like that part. I like having an HDMI out or something to go out so that it can be displayed somewhere on the screen. So that was the bad. Let's talk about the ugly. And the list is pretty small, but we need to talk about them. So in terms of the ugly, the first thing is many steps to get started. Not that any drone is perfect right out of the box, but the update was painful and it was slow. And it started at 70%. It went to 70% pretty quickly, but from here, from 70% all the way to 100, it felt like it went forever. And of course, it drained the battery quite a bit. So by the time I was ready to fly, I had to plug the battery in again so I could get maximum time on the battery. So just when you get that box, just be ready. It's going to take you a while. Use that time to read the user manual. There's a lot of good information in the user manual. So the update took forever. Some poor explanation inside of the manual. I think that was they could have done a better job with explaining what goes on inside the manual. So we'll have videos to help you with that, just because of I had to go through this and I just didn't like it. Another thing, the ugly, and this is something that you really need to be aware of. These goggles, and this is not new. If you've ever had goggles like this right here is extremely sensitive to the sun, to sunlight. Do not ever expose these to the sun. And this is something that Don told me before we get started. And unfortunately yesterday, and I was flying in the sun, and I had the misfortune of putting the goggles like this for a few seconds to tweak the drone a little bit. And when I came back, there was a tiny little patch inside the screen that was burned through. So don't do that. Be careful. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of other people that have this issue. And I should have known better because I knew about this already. But anytime you're going to put these goggles down, if you're outside, put them down this way and not up like this so that the sun can reflect in it. Don had told me this because he had done the same thing himself and didn't want me to do the same thing. And I did it. It's not horrible, but I know that if I had these exposed a little bit longer, then the screen would have been just damaged very badly. So just learn from me in this case. That's it. That's really it for the ugly. So I want to hear from Don now. So we're going to bring in Don into the studio, and I want to ask him a couple questions about what he felt, and then we have some footage that we took the day that we took it out. So let's talk to Don for a second.
Well, Greg, I think my opinion's going to differ a little bit. I've had a chance to fly this, and I know you guys are all wondering, how does it compare to a race drone with something like this? And we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about what this target audience was for. When I initially flew this, I kind of expected it to fly like a race drone. But then once I stepped back and I kind of realized what the target audience is for, I realized that this drone it's not a race drone. It's an FPV drone. And in my opinion, I think that DJI delivered an FPV drone pretty well. I think the product is as advertised. I do think that this product is for the novice, for the beginners, for the intermediate pilots. I think it gives them an opportunity to build up their flight skills. They can start in normal mode, they can work their way up into sport mode, and use the simulator in order to fly in manual mode. It's going to take some time, they're going to crash, and we'll talk about the durability factor in a minute. But I really think that this target audience was made for those types of guys. Also, one thing I want to mention is that I also think that this drone is made for the guys that want to take their Mavics and get that dynamic shot that they're looking for. And when they push their Mavics, they just can't quite get that shot. I think that this tool is perfect for them. So let's talk about the durability factor. I don't crash too often, and I didn't crash this one, but holding this in my hands right away, I know that the durability factor is not going to be as good as a carbon frame. These things are pretty rugged. The plastic, if you look right here, the plastic is the thinnest part at this point here. So if you actually look, you can flex it just by bending. And this part here is also a breaking point. The camera is a breaking point. So if you hit a tree by accident, if you're flying in manual mode, and you clip a branch and you hit the ground, I'm pretty sure that this thing's gonna either break an arm, break where the motor is right here, or your gimbal's gonna get broken. So that being said, I think that if this product is gonna succeed, DJI needs to offer some sort of replacement arms and also the gimbals too, because that's gonna be a major failing point. All right, so let's talk about the positives. When I first put this thing up, I was thoroughly impressed, and the video quality is something that I've never actually had before. I have a pair of DJI goggles at home, but whatever communication protocol they're using, the signal is improved. I don't get any latency in the video. Like, the latency's high, but I don't have any drop frame rates. So right away I was blown away with the crystal clear video. Not only that, but the return to home function was amazing. Like, I don't have that on my race drone. I just don't have it, and I wish I did. So the return to home is awesome. The pause feature is fantastic. So if you're flying manual mode and you get a little bit in a bind, you can hit that pause button and it stops on a dime and just waits for your next command. So that's awesome, especially for the beginner and the novice pilots trying to get into manual flying. That feature is really cool. So I know how you guys are all wondering if this compares to a race drone. And while it flies like a race drone and it acts and it looks like a race drone, I would argue that it's far from a race drone. To gain the title of race drone, you have to have low latency, you have to have a sharp tune, and you have to have high performance. And this drone just does not fit that category. It's fast enough, it's latent enough to fly, and the tune is mediocre. So what I would see this application in my personal bag of tools, let's say I'm going out and I need to film like a mountain range. This would be absolutely perfect. A few months back, I actually lost a drone because I lost video on analog, and this drone would have been perfect for that application. I think I would like to have this drone in my tool bag if I'm gonna take it out long range and trying to get that dynamic shot above a mountain range, or if I'm trying to get some sort of shot as an aerial view over a housing complex for some application like that. If I have to take this drone out to, let's say, like a racetrack, if I'm filming a drift event, or if I'm filming dirt bikers on the track, or jet skis on the water, I'm gonna really appreciate having that low latency feel and the direct control of my race drone. This thing has low latency and it gives me ultimate control. So if I'm close to an object, I have the confidence to be able to capture that dynamic shot without the latent feeling. And so I think that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. I like the DJI product, but in my bag of tools, I'm probably gonna stick with my race drone for those close-up applications. Back to you, Greg.
So you might ask, who is this for? Who's this drone for? I think this drone is not for a beginner. Somebody who's never flown a drone probably going to find this a little bit confusing at first. And I may be wrong with this. If this is something that you're interested in, if FPV is something that you're interested in, then you need to jump in and do that. But I think it's going to be somewhat interesting to get started with this. It's not going to be replacing your Mavic Air 2, your Mavic Pro, and all of that. It's a different style of flying. If you're doing commercial work at the moment, there are drones that are easier to fly to do that kind of stuff. If you're looking for the FPV kind of point of view, then this is the drone that you need. So be careful. I know it's very hyped right now. Wait until more people fly the drone get a better idea of what it actually does, how it does it. The first reviews that always come out are always people that, well, have a vested interest in making sure that their reviews get to the top. So they're not always the most thorough or most forward reviews, if I may say. I've seen a lot of good reviews. I'm not downing anyone out there that got the drone early. Obviously, this is cool. So, but make sure you do research to make sure that this is the kind of drone that's going to work for you. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. And I want to talk about the FAA Online Training because as you know, or as you may not know, the FAA did this thing where they said, well, all the online training is going to be available on March 1. And then, unfortunately, not their fault, not the FAA's fault or the DOT, the new administration decided that they were going to put a stop on new regulation. And so the new training available online got pushed to March 16. As we're recording this, it's not March 16 yet, which means that if you went online on FAAsafety.gov and you did any kind of training, it's not valid, okay? So I don't want you to think that you are current if you took the online training on the FAA website, because you're not current. There's 2 courses available on FAAsafety.gov right now. They're called Part 107 Unmanned Aircraft System Initial and Unmanned System Recurrent. These 2 courses are designed only for manned aircraft pilots who have a Part 61 certificate and need to get the Part 107 exam. If this is not your case, if you're not a private pilot, a commercial pilot for airplane or helicopter, or an airline transport pilot, you cannot take these courses. They may be good training, but it doesn't have any kind of legal ramification, so it's not valid. Wait until March 16. We don't know the name of the course yet. We don't know what it's going to be called, what the number is going to be. We know it's going to be available on March 16 unless the DOT decides to push the new regulation again. I hope not. I really hope not. This has been confusing enough. So if you're in the DOT making decisions and watching this, probably not, but please don't do it. Please, please, please make this happen. So that's it. So if you need to fly before March 16, if your certificate expires at the end of February and you need to take the recurrent exam, you need to do it at a testing center. You need to pay $160. And I know it's only for 16 days until that training is available. But if you don't want to do that, then you're not current for 16 days. You can't fly commercially or using the privileges of your remote pilot certificate, which is fine if that's what you want to do. There's no penalty to doing that. It's just that you can't use your privileges. So, okay, with that being said, let's move on to the last thing. And this is kind of a short story. Catching an arsonist in California. This is in Irvine, California. The police reported that there were 2 fires that were started by an arsonist, and they were able to catch the guy when he was starting the 3rd one using a drone. So it looked like a thermal camera, and they were able to find the person before he started another one. So they arrested him, a 40-some-year-old Californian, and able to stop that. So that was good. That was good use of drones. And again, I hate to see all these fires started everywhere, especially from crazy people like that. Okay, that's all I have. If you have questions, comments, leave them down in here, especially about the new drone. And if you're interested in watching more news update, we have the airplane news update that's posted on our airplane channel. This week, I'm actually talking about 3 different topics. I'm actually talking about eVTOL, electronic VTOL aircraft. I talk about this in the airplane side because, well, we were pretty busy in this news update this week. But there's actually 3 companies that are doing some really cool things. There are unmanned aircraft, but larger aircraft. So if you're interested in any kind of stuff, head over to our airplane channel and then watch the news update there. And then in the meantime, I'm going to go and have fun flying this FPV drone, and I'll see you guys next week.